Hello, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Art of Inspired Selling. My name is Kathryn Evans. I'm the founder of the Social Selling Agency and host of the live stream show. We live stream on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, and Twitter. So we are here today bringing you another inspiring story about how one entrepreneur is making an impact on the lives of others. So I search through my network and I find people that are not just surviving, but are thriving in this new normal that can bring to you a teachable moment to help you move yourself forward, just in case you're stuck and you're not quite sure what your next move is going to be. Today, I am bringing another fellow San Diegan to the stage. His name is Azim Khamisa. I'm not going to read his full bio because we actually have a YouTube story that I'm going to play that will give you the backstory that will help you find where this gentleman has come to inspire, embrace, and change the lives of others through forgiveness. So I'm going to take myself off. I'm going to play a video and we'll be right back with you.
Time now for our Friday Making a Difference report and the story of a man whose capacity for forgiveness is astonishing. He suffered the worst loss a parent can ever face, and yet he decided to turn his grief into something positive for himself and a troubled young man. Here's NBC's John Larson.
A documentary began the story like this.
14-year-old Tony Hicks shot and killed 20-year-old Tariq Khamisa.
A 14-year-old murders a promising young college student for the cost of a pizza and becomes the youngest child in California history charged as an adult with murder and gets life in prison.
It was like a nuclear bomb going off in my heart.
Azim Khamisa, the father of the victim, buried his only son Tariq according to their Muslim custom. He climbed down into the muddy grave. It had been raining, and they lowered his son's body wrapped in a white cloth down into his open arms.
Yeah, I didn't want to live there alone. I stayed there a long time. When something bad happens, you can stop that bad from happening to other people.
But when he finally came up, he did something remarkable.
It is wrong to lie, to cheat.
First, he forgave the family of the killer.
It was a defining moment in my life.
Only through that forgiveness,
which in turn helped Azim start the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, speaking together to more than 1 million children about the real pain of violence.
And sometimes it scars the soul forever.
Then, Azim visited Tony Hicks, the killer, who had never had a father, and forgave him too.
His forgiveness wasn't something I expected.
Now Azim is lobbying to have Tony released from prison early, like he was his own son. And when he gets out of prison, what do you hope for him?
We'll have a job for him at the foundation.
So you're going to hire him?
Absolutely.
This is the killer of your son?
Yes.
Tony says now he knows what a real father is.
I had a man forgive me for taking the life of his son.
And he will work for that father, and for many who maybe never had fathers, someday, whether he gets out early or not. John Larson, NBC News, San Diego, California.
What a story, right? So without further ado, I'm going to bring Mr. Khamisa onto the stage, or onto the show. He's CEO of Sovereign Capital Markets and has over oh, goodness, sorry. Let me get these things closed. That's no fun. Okay. He's CEO of Sovereign Capital Markets and has over 27 years of successful experience in domestic and international investment banking. His professional work has been recognized in the 10th edition of Who's Who in the World and the 3rd edition of Who's Who in Emerging Leaders in America. He's multi-lingual, naturalized U.S. citizen, and has resided in the United States for 21 years. He is educated in Kenya and the United Kingdom. So let's have him tell his own story some more. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on Azim. Hello. Welcome to the Art of Inspired Selling, and thank you so much today for being a guest.
You're welcome, Kathryn. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I love your story. I know that it set the ground and the basis point for where you are today, and what you're doing to improve the lives of others. Before we get into that part, tell me, where are you today?
Well, I am in a good place. I have started two nonprofit organizations.
Mhm.
I've authored 5 books. I've given over 1,000 presentations to students all the way from elementary to university around the world. I've given over 600 keynotes to adults at conferences around the world. I won over 80 awards with luminaries like Desmond Tutu, Ted Koppel, Muhammad Ali. I'm at peace, although my genesis of my story is, as you pointed out in the video, is very tragic. And the portal to get where I am was forgiving my son's killer. So what I want to talk about today is about forgiveness. I thought, having done this work, actually, I've been doing this work for over 26 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been in the United States for 45 years and have also the investment banking experience. And what I have learned in my journey is that many of us are in resentment, anger, and sometimes hatred for what has been done to us. Everyone has a story. I'm sure you relate to that. Or we are in guilt. And what I discovered in my journey is that if you are living in anger, hatred, resentment, guilt, shame, you really can't be out there 100%.
Right. It's like your kryptonite, your own personal kryptonite, right? That's holding you back from greatness. So before we get into the teaching today, you're located in San Diego, correct?
Yes, I
In La
live.
Jolla.
Yes, very nice part of the world.
Yes, we are. It's so sunny and beautiful today. And so, and you just gave more about your why. Is there anything else that you use? Part of the art of inspired selling is that I want people to relate to others who have found this deep story, this deep drive, this deep passion to do what they do. What is it that you think of every morning when you wake up? What is it that has that fire in the belly drive for you that you go to? I know you've developed your own skills, but is there one go-to that you can share that people who might have had a recent wrong, or just in general in business, is there one thing that you can share with them that they could use as a tool?
Yeah, I mean, I meditate a couple hours a day. I used to meditate an hour a day. A lot of my ahas come through my meditation. I recognize that in life you get problems your intellect will not solve. In life you get problems your hearts are not going to be able to heal.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, there are no problems, and let me underscore that, there are no problems in your life that your soul or your spirit cannot solve or heal. And I think I'm a good example of that. So what gets me up every morning is to be able to share my journey and teach that through using nothing wrong with a good mind or good intellect and a PhD or a loving heart, but it's limited. That where real transformation lives, where real impact and finding your life's mission and purpose really is much deeper. It's in your spirit. I actually coined the word cellular. People
Cellular, I like that.
Yeah, because people ask me, what kind of work do you do? I tell them I don't work only at the cognitive or the emotional level. I work at the cellular level, because once you transform at the level of the spirit, that transformation sustains.
That
You're never the same person. I'm not the same person I was when my son was alive. Neither is the kid who killed him. He's now joined us. He's 40 years old. So the point I'm trying to make is, you cannot be impactful if you haven't forgiven people that have harmed you or yourself, because these are very debilitating, knowing emotions
Oh, yes.
that preclude you from working at your zenith.
Now,
So,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I want you guys all to remember that this is a live show. I see that there's people coming from us from multiple platforms. So please, if you want to just drop in the chat and let me know you're there, we can answer any questions. But I'd love to give you a shout out if you would like to be interactive at any time you have a question. We can pause Azim and ask him the question directly. So today we're going to talk about forgiveness, and that is just such a big thing, and that is to get to that point in life where you can find that actually forgiving is for you, right? It's for you. Um, what do you teach when you talk about forgiveness? Do you have a definition?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
People ask me, how do I know I have forgiven? And I always tell them, when that other person, whoever that is, has a safe passage through your mind. When I think about the person who killed my son, my blood pressure doesn't go up. I don't get angry.
I'm going to make some notes here while you say that so people can comment on it. So
Yeah.
you said true forgiveness is when someone can move through your mind, you said?
Yeah, have a passage through your mind, without you getting into anger or hatred, or your blood pressure goes up, or your heart starts to beat faster, that they have a safe passage through your mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get angry or any of that. In fact, I created a lot of love for the kid who killed my son. I've been working as a grandfather in the foundation for the last 26 years. He recently joined us, and amazingly doing amazing work to save other kids from not following in his former footsteps.
So is he out of prison now?
Yeah, he was. I was at his parole hearing with my daughter, who is the executive director of the foundation I set up in my son's name, advocating for his parole. Even the commissioner was very shocked. He says, I've been doing this work for 35 years. I've never had a victim's father and sister advocating for the offender's parole. And I told him that, I never saw him to be a victim. I never saw him to be the enemy. I saw him, radicalized like a lot of young people do, and get involved with crime and gangs. He was 11 when he joined a gang and killed my son at 14. That the real culprit wasn't Tony. It was all the societal peer pressure that forced many young men and women, especially of color, to fall through the crack. And that's what the foundation is trying to stop. And he's now helping us do that.
That's wonderful and beautiful. It's just such a great story. So why is forgiveness important? That's one of the topics we wanted to talk on today. Why forgiveness is important. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so I think there are two reasons why forgiveness is important. Actually, maybe three reasons, but the first one is, if you're living in anger, in hatred, in resentment, who are you hurting? Yourself.
Yes.
The one thing about forgiveness is it's important for you to separate yourself from the offender. Leave the offender to the higher power. There is no escaping wrongdoing. Karma always balances. And it is very important that you understand that you have your journey and the offender has his journey, but you don't want to be in judgment, because forgiveness, as you pointed out, is a gift you give to yourself. Now, if you stay in anger, hatred, and resentment, who are you hurting?
Yourself and those around you too.
Yeah,
right?
and you might as well take a whip and beat yourself. There's a great quote from Mandela. He says, unforgiveness is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemy to die. So that's the first piece, is I didn't want to go through life anger and hatred, very often that anger and hatred manifests as cancer. You've seen many examples of that. So you want to be sure. I mean, when I wrote my first book, which was 1998, there wasn't much on forgiveness. Today, there are over 800 clinical studies that suggest why forgiveness is not only healthy, it makes you happier and helps you stay in the flow of life. So that's the first reason. Second reason is there's no quality of life being a victim. I didn't want to go through life on crutches. I know a lot of people feel sorry because I lost my one and only son. But there's no life. I mean, I wanted that full life back. I worked in international finance. I traveled the world, stayed in nice places, ate at good restaurants, was successful, good social life. And then I couldn't even get out of bed.
Completely paralyzing, right?
Yeah.
Just
So I wanted the full life back, and I have it back today because the foundation, with the grace of God, has been very successful. We just celebrated our 25th anniversary.
Congratulations on that.
And we're real time saving kids. So the other point is that unless you forgive, you stay a victim. And the third reason as to why you want to forgive is, I wasn't trained in social services, or I wasn't an author and a speaker or a teacher. Today I am all of that because I can be out there 100%.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not mired with anger and resentment and guilt and shame. I've forgiven people that have harmed me. I've forgiven myself, so I can be fully present. So that's a good reason to forgive.
For sure. And did you say there was a third one as well?
That was the third one.
That was the third one.
That was the third one. So, the first one is you don't want to live in anger, hatred. The second one is you don't want to live like a victim. And number three is once you forgive others and yourself, you can be out there 100%. And you're going to be more impactful, whether you're selling or whether you're working on your life's mission or you're writing a book, whatever it is you're doing, because you're not mired in this debilitating emotions.
And do you think you mentioned meditation?
Right.
So in your meditation, are you doing guided meditation? I know that there's probably a lot of people watching this and their head is so noisy. And especially if you are experiencing some sort of wrongdoing, right? Either you did something wrong or somebody did something wrong to you. How can you quiet your mind to get to that point where you can actually, it's one thing to hear you say it, right? It's another thing to actually start making one step forward to doing it.
Right.
And do you feel that meditation plays a role in being able to do that?
Absolutely. So if you go to my website, azimkhamisa.com, and scroll down to the bottom of the home page,
Mm-hmm.
there is a preamble on the methodology of my meditation. I've been meditating for 50 years now. I've studied most all of the practices and have created my own.
Mm-hmm.
So the preamble teaches you I meditate 3 different times a day, but I do different things at those 3 different times. And then there are 2 guided meditations. One is on forgiveness because I teach forgiveness.
Yes.
I normally I used to do a 2-day in-person class, and now I'm doing a 4-day online class, 4 hours a day, so a total of 16 hours. And I just finished one because it's a deep dive. And those that are dealing with some heavy duty stuff, I would recommend they stay in touch. You can sign my newsletter. I probably will do the next one in the summer. And it really,
the next class.
yeah,
Yes.
Everybody gets a breakthrough. So that is very important. So, and the second guided meditation on my homepage is on manifesting your goal, your life's mission, or whatever you're working on. Because what I realized that what helped me get through my son's tragedy was not my degrees in mathematics and finance, although I went to some pretty good schools in England. What helped me was my spiritual foundation. I started to meditate when I was 20. I lost my son in my early 40s. So I had a pretty solid spiritual foundation. Well, I couldn't eat or sleep I could meditate and still can meditate and connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
Then I realized, because, when my son was alive, I lived in my head like many of us do.
Oh,
But
and
now,
the saying goes, right? If you live in your head, you're dead.
right.
So,
And so now I realize the power of the spirit, that it is mightier than the intellect, mightier than the mind and the heart. And that if it can help me navigate my son's tragedy, and as you pointed out, not only have I survived, I've thrived, why don't I use spirit in everything I do?
mm-hmm. That's
So
so
how,
powerful.
so
Yeah.
how do you connect with your spirit? Is you do it through meditation. Now,
Yeah.
one of the other questions you ask is a big impediment to meditation is because we all have monkey minds, thought after thought after thought after thought after thought after thought.
Yes.
How do you stop that? So the way you stop your monkey mind is, first, I teach this breathing technique, because your breath is like the reins of your mind, much like the reins on a horse. And there is this one technique that I use a lot. There are many breathing techniques. Comes from prana yoga. Prana means breath in Sanskrit. Yoga means union. But they have one thing that I use when my mind's too busy. It's called the alternate nostril breathing. So you use your right thumb and your two middle fingers. You close your right thumb, breathe in from your left, breathe out from your left, put your two fingers.
It just got complicated. It's like,
And the point is, you breathe from one nostril in and out, and then you move to the another one, and you breathe in and out.
in and out.
And when you're doing this, your mind is very occupied as to whether you're left nostril, right nostril, and it actually stops your mind from thinking. And you can pull this up. I teach that in my preamble, and in my guided meditation, I help people during the guided meditation practice this so that they know how to stop this monkey mind from thought after thought after thought, because meditation is being in the gap. Now, what is the gap? See, when you are going from thought to thought to thought, the important thing to get is you can't think about two thoughts at the same time. You go from one thought to the second thought, but there is a gap. And when you become an experienced meditator, you can make that gap large, because it's not a gap. Even if you look at a cell, it's mostly empty. You have a nucleus and electrons and neutrons, but the empty space is where the universal intelligence lives.
So we just had somebody make a comment that breath is reign of your mind. Nice, thank you, Dr. Yao, for being here. Breath is reign of your mind, thoughts. One tech is alternative nostril breathing, which can stop the mind from thinking, which is exactly yes.
It's not rain, it's REIN. Rain,
Okay.
like a horse. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yes.
that's important to know, that the way you control your mind, because meditation is when you are not in your mind, you are in your body temple, and your body temple knows how to get you to that gap, but the mind, it always wants to be in charge. So you need to control the mind, and you do that through breath, because your breath is the rein, REIN.
Okay.
Just like you would have on a horse.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And how, if we have that internal conversation going, like there's no room for other people, right? There's no room for other things to deal with.
Right.
It's enough to be in that. And then, let's just remind people that meditation is a practice, just like a yoga practice, just like a sport practice. If all you can do today in meditation is 10 minutes, right? If all you can do is move the next day to 10 minutes, if you have a complicated meditation, you still did it, right? You still did it. You
Right.
still went through the motion. You still...
Because when you are in the gap, and even the most experienced meditators get seconds in the gap, but half a second in the gap is powerful, because you really, to me, I always get the gap. I've been meditating for a very long time. And when you experience the gap, it literally is like taking a dip in the river of love, compassion, and wisdom. A lot of my ahas download when I meditate. Meditation is a download. Prayer is an upload. And that ability to be silent and to be meditating is where you're going to get your ahas. All my books I've written come through there. All the inspiration I get comes through there. So it's, we deal with our five senses, but our strongest sense is our intuition, which is our sixth sense. And when you meditate, not only improve the other five senses, you become intuitive. You'll be able to pick up all of these messages. And in my book, I teach that. Secrets of the Bulletproof Spirit, which was published by Random House in 2009. There are 30 chapters in it. You can buy it on my website if you want an autographed copy, or you can buy it on Amazon. It also comes as an ebook. And each chapter, there's a lesson of how do you strengthen your spiritual resiliency. And then there's a boot camp. So what practices do you want to put in to be able to be spiritually resilient, to be able to forgive, and then manifest your life's mission?
That's all just beautiful. It's just beautiful. Let's move on to the next point that we want to make about forgiveness, which is 3 milestone steps. Let's talk about that bullet point for a second.
Yes. So the first milestone gap to forgive people that have hurt you is to acknowledge that you have been wronged. Now, that's a grieving process.
Mm-hmm.
It's a painful process. We have lost the art of grieving. Grieving is medicine. There is a great adage from the Turkish tradition that says, he who conceals his grief does not find a remedy for it. Now, there's healthy ways to grieve, and then there's unhealthy ways to grieve. We all know what the unhealthy ways are, whether they are legal or illegal drugs. The healthy way to grieve is to spend time with nature. Journaling helped me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Sharing your story with somebody helps a lot. There's a Swedish proverb that says shared happiness is double happiness. Shared sorrow is half sorrow. Sure, if you find a good therapist, I acknowledge that can be very helpful. I think that to do more self-care, because when you are grieving, you're hurting. Our tendency is we don't like pain, slight headache, and you want an extra strength Tylenol. And problem with that is you're going to take another one 5 hours later.
I had made a comment. I work with the hypnotist Deanna Nunez here in San Diego, and I'm going through some grief now. I've lost 2 fathers in 60 days, right? So that's like double grief. Right. And I said, okay, I'm ready to start grieving now. And she said, it's like you just said to me, you're going to start and then you're going to stop. Like you're going to just finally like open the door, right? To have a start and a stop to that process. But it's a process.
Oh yes, it's a milestone process. And in my Sufi tradition, I grew up as a Sufi Muslim. Mm-hmm. Sufis are the metaphysical arm of Islam, and as Rumi says, the cure for pain is in the pain. He's a Sufi, or he will say that the light enters through the wound. In our tradition, when somebody passes, we have a 40-day grieving period. You are not supposed to cook or clean house. I had people from my congregation brought me a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I live by myself. I had a lot of food, but you are asked to tell the story. And I couldn't even in those early days say Tariq died. It was like a 2,000 volt through my system, but they would wait. And every hour we would pray. Sufis chant a lot. We would chant, and then another group would come in. And it was painful. It was like taking the scab off the wound. But once the scab is reformed, it was a little smaller than the one I took out. So now I look back at that ritual, which are thousands of years old, by the way. Rituals are older than language. That we've lost the rituals to help us get through those difficult times. Even in the Jewish faith, they have a similar ritual called sitting Shiva. I think for 11 days. But the point is that my spiritual advisor told me that the reason you grieve for 40 days is because your son's soul stays in close proximity of family and loved ones. And that's the time you have to grieve. After 40 days, your son's soul moves to another consciousness, because we believe there's a journey after death, because souls are immortal. And by excessive grieving of family and friends, it will impede your son's journey in the next world. My recommendation to you is, instead of grieving after the grieving period is over, do good compassionate deeds in the name of the departed, because good compassionate deeds are spiritual currency and will transfer to the departed soul and provide high octane fuel for his forward journey in the next world. And I thought to myself, why don't they teach you this stuff in college? You know? So this is where it is important to understand that, yes, you have to grieve, but then you have to create a sunset in grieving and transmute that grief into something positive energy. So 9 months after Tariq died, I created the Azim Khamisa Foundation with a mission of stopping kids from killing kids, teaching nonviolence, teaching empathy, teaching compassion, teaching forgiveness, teaching peace building. But my inspiration was Tariq's name is on the marquee, and by being a nonprofit, we are doing good compassionate deeds, saving lives of kids, and we'll create millions of dollars of spiritual currency so he could finish his journey in the next world in a rocket. That was meaningful.
Yes.
It was a win for Tariq. It was a win for me because, I'd lost all my energy when he died. Routinely I flew in from London, flew to Tokyo. Then, I couldn't even get out of bed. But now I had a purpose. I had to create spiritual currency for my son. It still gets me up today. It was a win for me. It was a win for Tariq. It's a win for society.
Let's talk a moment about someone, and we're in this pandemic. There's been a lot of death, but let's just move for 1 second from forgiving and death to maybe there's been a lot of people that have lost their jobs, right? And they feel like they've been wronged by, because of that, they bought into some sort of we theory with the pandemic, right? Or why did you let me go instead of somebody else? And so you're talking about some pretty grand events that you have done, but what are some things for other people that might watch this that perhaps they didn't lose a family member or a loved one, but they lost something else that they had tied themselves to emotionally? What are some things that they could do along those same lines, which will help them be able to forgive in the same sense?
Well, I think you need a mindset to understand that everything you attract, everything that comes to you, you attract for your spiritual evolution.
Ooh, that's really good.
What that means is that the universe is constantly nudging us towards our spiritual purpose. We all have a spiritual purpose. It's complicated to know what that is. It was for me too, till I lost my son. And then I believe he came into my life to gift me by putting me on my spiritual purpose, which I really feel today. When you are on your spiritual purpose, you have a perpetual tailwind and the road rises to meet you because the universe is your partner. Mm-hmm. If you've lost a job, sometimes you go through a divorce, sometimes something else happens. You don't say, why me? That's a victim mentality.
Right.
What you really say is, why did I attract this to me? You get different answers because I found purpose through my tragedy. But I was having a hard time too, because this concept that everything that happens to you attract comes from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And having done this work for 25 plus years, I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of enlightened luminaries like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I was hosted in 2004 by Pope John Paul, mm-hmm. who died in 2005 at his summer palace in Castel Gandolfo, Italy. And he invited 30 people The Dalai Lama joined us for 2 days. The rest of us were there for 5 days. I was lucky to be one of them.
What a beautiful experience that must have been. Yes.
Synthesis dialogues. And it was an amazing experience. I took 9 pages of notes from what the Dalai Lama taught and then gave a talk on it, which you can find the link on my website if you're interested. Brilliant. But one of the things I was having a problem with is this concept that everything that happens to you, you attract. And, I asked one of the monks that I got very close to because His Holiness travels with an entourage. I said, I'm having a hard time with that. Did I attract the death of my son? Did I attract the murder of my son? No parent would ever do that. And he said, according to our tradition, before you were born and your son was born, you had a contract that he would come to your life. And we believe that in every lifetime you have lessons to learn, because it sometimes takes 1,000 lifetimes for humans to achieve enlightenment. Mm-hmm. Because we humans don't learn very easily, do we? Sometimes we do the same thing over and over again.
And over, expecting a different outcome at the end. Yes.
Yeah. So he said, so you had a contract with him, and then he would die at 20 because one of your lessons in this lifetime was forgiveness. But God gave us free will. So when Tariq died, you still had to make a choice between revenge and forgiveness, and you made the right choice. So in your next lifetime, you don't have to lose another son. And I know this is an evolved view.
Yes.
But if you go to the point that whatever happens to you, you attract for your own spiritual evolution. And if you ask the question, why did I attract this to me? Why did I lose my job? Why did I go through a divorce? Why did my house burn down? Whatever. You get different answers because the universe is trying to nudge you to make choices that bring you to your life's purpose. And once you do find that, it's blue skies ahead.
And another way to frame that is to get very curious, right? To be very curious about what happened, and to look for a friend of mine would say the gift, or to look for the lesson of what happened. It just using different terms, and it may not show itself today, right? It may not show itself tomorrow, but to always open and hold space with that curiosity in that moment of, okay, this was an experience. What's my reaction? I'm curious as to what it was and what was the lesson I was supposed to learn in this. And that's right. I'm guessing, assuming, stating that meditation can help because you can sit with it and wait to receive the message or the subconscious.
Precisely. Precisely. Yes. I mean, prayer, journaling, meditation, asking for help, calling in the troops, spending time with nature, more self-care, get a massage, and then you'll get signs. Sometimes you pick up a sign, being curious, as you point out, on a bumper sticker, because the universe will always be trying to nudge you towards what it is that you need to get from whatever hit you took. Because really, I believe that hits are spiritual bullion, because in every hit there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom to be gained by being curious, as you pointed out. So my method is meditation, because I download a lot in my meditation. I love to meditate, and my downloads on my website are free. So if anybody wants to go down there, they can listen to the preamble, and then the guided meditation on forgiveness or manifesting your goal you can do on a daily basis. I never not meditate.
I dropped your website link into the chat so everybody can see that it's there. So before we run out of time, let's move over to, we talked about the steps for forgiving people that have harmed you.
Right.
And then the 3 milestone steps for forgiving yourself.
Right.
So that one's really impactful. Let's talk about that for a moment.
Right. So the we only covered the first milestone step for forgiving people that have harmed you.
So we could totally go back to those. Let's not leave anything on the table here.
Yeah, and but quickly, because I said in my workshop, I do a very deep dive, and we do experiential exercises to not only understand, but really deep dive into these steps.
Mm-hmm.
And then the participants teach back. I teach for 12 hours. They teach back for the 4 hours. And once you teach something back, you really understand it and you retain it. Something like this, you
Love it.
You might retain very little bit of it. But the second step in forgiving people that have harmed you, excuse me,
God bless you.
is to thank you. It's to have a high level of empathy and have an intention. So I do an exercise in my workshop is how do you strengthen your empathy muscle? And the precursor to forgiveness is compassion. The precursor to compassion is empathy. And the precursor to empathy is to put yourself in the shoes of the offender. Sometimes I think if I'd lived just like Tony, he was born to a 15-year-old, had a lot of violence in his family. His father was not in his life. And if I had a very tough background, he was seduced by his uncle's girlfriend when he was 8 years old. I mean, it was just, when you look at his life, I thought if I had lived like him, I might have made the same decision because the pizza delivery man was nobody.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So the empathy is important to create because at some level we've all made mistake. And the second thing is intention. Now, intention is very, very, very powerful because Wayne Dyer, who passed away, who was also somebody I knew and spoke with, wrote a book called The Power of Intention. Because intention, when you set an intention, especially when you set it at a meditative alpha C level,
Mm-hmm.
the universe will conspire to manifest that for you. It's not important how you do it, it's the why. You see what it is that you're trying to manifest. That intention is very strong. And when you listen to my meditation, you'll see that I'll guide you to set that intention. So once you have the tools of creating more empathy within you and setting the intention, you'll be able to do the second step, which is giving up all the resulting resentment. So the first one was acknowledge you've been wrong, which was the grief process. Now you're going to give up all the resulting resentment. And the third step is to reach out. Reach out to the offender with love and compassion. Not everybody has to reach out to the person who killed their child. Sometimes you reach out to, in my workshop, I get a lot of father-son issues, mother-daughter issues, ex-husband, ex-wives, business partners. We have a lot of angst in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
You're reaching out to somebody at one time you loved, So they, as I said, they have a safe passage through your mind. And when I reached out to Tony, it was a very powerful experience for me because he was in prison. That was 5 years after the tragedy, so he was 19 years old. And it took many meditation. Not easy to reach out to the person who murdered your child. I mean, after all, we are mortals. But I understood that for me to complete my journey of forgiveness, at some point I had to come eyeball to eyeball with Tony.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did, we were together for a couple of hours. I had some tough questions. But the seminal moment was we locked eyeballs. I'm looking in his eyes and he's looking in my eyes for what seemed like a long time. He was well behaved. He was remorseful. He was articulate. He was a likable kid. I could tell that my hand of forgiveness had shifted him because I reached out to his grandfather soon after I started the foundation, which was 9 months after Tariq died.
Mm-hmm.
So he knew I'd forgiven him because I've been working with his grandfather and guardian. But that moment when we locked eyeballs, I'm looking in his eyes trying to find a murderer. But I was able to climb through his eyes and touch his humanity, that I got that the spark in him was no different than the spark in you or anybody else who is viewing or listening to this interview. I wasn't expecting that. And at that point, I told him, Tony, you know I've forgiven you. I've been working with your granddad for many years. But I want you to know when you come out, you have a job at the foundation. You can come work with your grandfather and me. And I left the prison, and I still remember, that was 21 years ago. I still remember that as I left the prison, my stride leaving was a lot more bouncier than the one.
A lot lighter. Yeah.
Because it's very freeing.
Yes.
And the same thing happened to him, because the next day the grandfather called me and says, Azim, that meeting you had with Tony has totally transformed him. He said, before you met him, he would say, Daddy, I'm not going to make it. He lived with his grandfather, calls him Daddy. He's a young, good-looking, charismatic boy in an adult prison. Well, you know what our prisons are like.
Mm-hmm.
He says, as you were leaving, he said to me, Daddy, that is a special man. I killed his one and only son. Not only has he forgiven me, he's offered me a job. I'm not worthy of his forgiveness and of his job offer, but I'm going to try. Then he aced his GED, 94 percentile at 22. He's now out. He's studying to be a plumber and volunteering for the foundation, much like his grandfather and I have done for the last 25 years. And this morning we were on the show with Tamron Hall on ABC, and the three of us were there, me, my daughter, and Tony. And he's also presenting to the students. You know, the foundation reaches tens of thousands of students every year, and I know that he will save many, many more lives. So this reach out is important.
It sounds like it, and it's just a beautiful story that you have, and it's still in process, right? The lives that you will touch, the lives that he will touch, it's still moving forward with, and it's living with purpose, and it's just wonderful.
Well, now you want to go to those 3 points about forgiving yourselves?
Let's go to the last 3 points about forgiving ourselves. And I appreciate your time to deliver your message to the audience. And we've had interaction. We have people watching. So yes, let's talk about forgiving yourself.
Yeah, so the steps are different, but eventually they converge, because forgiving others and forgiving yourselves is the flip side of the same coin. So the first step is you take responsibility for your action. Tony was the first 14-year-old in the state of California to be tried as an adult.
I did see that, yeah.
And at his sentencing, he said, I shot and killed Tariq Khamisa, a person I did not know who was not doing any harm to me. But that never happens. When a judge asks, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty, what do they normally say? Not
guilty.
Yeah. He didn't say that. I shot and killed Tariq Khamisa. I am guilty. Tendency is we blame everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't blame the 18-year-old who gave him the order to shoot my son. He didn't blame his grandfather, his mother, his father. I shot and killed Tariq Khamisa, a person I did not know who was not doing anything wrong. So that's the first step, is to take responsibility for your actions. It's okay you make mistakes. Not okay if you don't take responsibility for it in a responsible way, in a cathartic way, in a deep way, like you mean it. Second part, in the same speech, it says, I pray to God Mr. Khamisa would forgive me. Of course, I'd already forgiven him, but he asked for my forgiveness. And that's the right thing to do. When you screw up, take responsibility, make a meaningful apology, ask for forgiveness. And again, it can't be, I'm sorry, and walk away. No, you have to really mean it.
Mm-hmm.
To really feel it with your head, heart, and soul that you did make a mistake. We all screw up. And the main thing there is to understand that to forgive yourselves, you've got to change that behavior forever.
Yes.
And when you ask for that apology, you want to say that I've learned that I made a mistake. I ask for your forgiveness, and I am never, ever going to repeat this offending behavior again. And not only that, I'm going to redeem myself by making sure others don't make that mistake. It's Tony's thing, because you then move into service. And now there's a genuine level of forgiveness, because I speak in prisons. There's a program called LCP, called Life Connection Program. And I speak in 3 federal prisons, and I teach them self-forgiveness. Now, the recidivism rate in the adult system is 2/3. But if they go through the LCP program, it's under 17%.
Could you imagine what the world would be like if someone made a wrongdoing, a significant wrongdoing, and every person that did that came out to make a difference in the lives of other people? Could you
Yeah.
imagine what a beautiful world this would be? If
Absolutely.
they did, instead of using the substance or using the alcohol or using the gun or using the situation or the bullying or whatever the situation was,
Wow.
that was a catalyst and an excuse
Right.
to
And
make
it's not
that decision change. It's as simple as making that decision, right?
right. But behaviors are not easy to change, as I'm sure. I drink too much caffeine, But 83% of those prisoners that go through the LCP program actually change their behavior. And not only that, didn't go back to prison, they're doing good work out there, stopping other kids from not following their former footsteps. As you just pointed out, we have a tremendous amount of resource. So that's the formula for forgiving yourself. Take responsibility for your action, make a genuine ask for forgiveness, change your behavior, and help others not make the same mistakes. And the more you do that, the more easier it becomes to forgive yourselves.
Yep. And you take the shift off of you to support others on their journey. So all of that is absolutely beautiful. And before we wrap the show, everyone, if anybody has any last minute comments, Dr. Ya, I want to thank you so much for joining. We had Mr. Kaufman on the call as well. There's other people that don't want to make themselves known, but that's okay. This show will be while it's live, it will be on all your favorite platforms to refer back to, because there's a lot to unpack, right? There's a lot to look at. I recommend everybody go to Azim's website and do some of the meditations, the guided meditations. They're all so helpful. I know in my life, I wake up and I meditate frequently. I won't say daily, but I do meditate frequently, and it's been a long practice of mine. And it helps him your day in this beautiful package when you do what tools you have to help you along your journey. If it's waking up and it's journaling and it's meditating, if you have a gratitude journal and you can use that as a tool, and remember to write that in at the end of the day. All those tools that we learn are not good unless you actually use them, right? So what beautiful thing do you have to wrap our show? I appreciate your time and your consideration to the audience. Any book that we want to drop into the
Let me finish with a quote that I wrote, which my first book was From Murder to Forgiveness, and Forgiveness to Fulfillment, and Fulfillment to Peace. It's a trilogy. And the quote that inspired my last book, and Tony actually wrote the foreword to my last book, is this quote, which I think is a good takeaway.
Let's see if I can type it while you're saying it. Okay.
I can email it to you. It's a long one.
Okay.
Sustained goodwill creates friendship, and that ought to be obvious. You don't make friends by bombing them. You make friends by extending goodwill over a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Sustained goodwill creates friendship. Sustained friendship creates trust. Sustained trust creates empathy. Sustained empathy creates compassion. And sustained compassion creates peace. But people ask me, how do you extend goodwill to the person who murdered your child? I tell them, you do that through forgiveness. As it's evident, it worked for me. It worked for my family.
Mm-hmm.
What is a miracle is it worked for him and his family. It can work for you and your family.
Yes.
Israel and Palestine, North and South Korea, Iraq, Syria, Iran, Afghanistan. It can work for the United States of America. Indeed, it can work for the world. So let me leave you with this, that peace is possible. How do I know that? Because I am at peace. Thank you and namaste.
Namaste. Thank you so much. If you'll just stay on the platform for just a minute, I'll wrap the show. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Art of Inspired Selling. I hope this inspirational journey that Azim has been on touches you. Refer back to it. I appreciate everybody for showing up today, and we will be back next week. I'm on vacation. We'll be back in 2 weeks with the Art of Inspired Selling. Thank you so much.